at around 11% back in 2009, and how it's had some steady drop-offs in recent months. For the last 4 months, we've seen a consistent drop-off in the unemployment rate down to about, like I said, 9.5% now. But if we look at it more closely, again, I'm always harping on employment growth as the number to look at, not so much the unemployment rate. So let's take a look and get an example of why that's the case. Here we can track the unemployment rate for South Carolina. This just goes back to its peak back in 2009, November of 2009, and tracks it since then. And what you can see that except for this mid-region here in 2011, it's been on a steady decline, either a constant rate or a consistently falling rate, except for the months in 2011 from roughly May to October. Right in there, we saw that little unemployment rate bubble. All right, so what may have caused that? Well, let's take the unemployment rate, sort of freeze that in your mind, and now let's go and let's look at the labor force over the same time period, again from November 2009 to present, and keep in mind really May to October of 2011 is when we see this unemployment rate bubble here. So what do you notice about the labor force? Well, we have another bubble here, right, with the labor force going up significantly during that period. So the reason that that unemployment rate went up during 2011 was not because we weren't seeing job gains, it was because we were seeing these increases in the labor force. Because these spikes are more dramatic than the spikes that we saw from November 2009 all the way to early 2011, because we saw a continued drop in the unemployment rate despite these fluctuations in the labor force up until that point. But it's only when you get these huge sudden gains in the labor force that overpower the improvements in employment that you see that unemployment rate begin to tick up. So why am I telling you this? Why is this important? The reason is that when you see the unemployment rate go up, that doesn't necessarily, or stagnate, that doesn't necessarily mean a stagnant economy. And it's not going to mean that in 2012 either. We have a forecast that we do annually at the Moore School of Business, and here's what the outlook for the unemployment rate for 2012 is expected to be. And we're thinking that it's going to be between about 9.5 and 10% over the next year. However, that doesn't mean a stagnant economy. And here's why. When you think about people coming back into getting jobs and the economy beginning to recover and more people getting work, what does that encourage folks to do who haven't been looking for work? They begin to get back into the labor force and begin looking for jobs again. And so as that labor force number rises, because people are getting back into the labor force looking for work again, whereas before they had dropped out, had been discouraged workers and so on, that's going to tend to bid that unemployment rate up, or at the least leave it constant, leave it where it is. So in other words, if you've got a certain number of people who are unemployed who get jobs, but you have more people that were out of the labor force that come in because the economy is getting better, and now they're unemployed and replacing the ones that just got jobs, what change have you seen to the unemployment rate? You haven't seen any, even though more people are getting employed. So it's important to realize that a stagnant unemployment rate does not mean a stagnant economy. So I think over the next year, while we will see employment growth, it won't necessarily